Hello, awesome people. I hope you're having an amazing day today. Today we're taking a look at the penultimate short story in this collection, Farewell to Lankhmar, by Fritz Leiber. It's the fourth and final collection of his stuff that got started getting published in 1939. And he got published starting then in the pulp era for you folks. And this heavy series was heavily published in our, the last one in this is a novel that I actually haven't read before for you folks. And then also, I actually haven't read this collection. I bought it after I finished the third novel of collection and going a deep dive into it, and I never actually started this. So there are 4 more short stories for you folks. So let's go ahead and get started. This short story is called The Curse of the Smalls and the Scars. So that's it by Fritz Leiber for you folks. And so we'll be looking at this and what I actually think about it. Now here's the issue with this, right? Starting with the Frost Monstrum, there has been a series of stories that picks up from where the previous one has, which is the second to last story, also the penultimate story in the previous collection prior to a novella called The Rye Mile. So I can't give you a synopsis of what happens at the beginning of this short story. Normally what I do is my reviews are spoiler free, right? So I'll typically tell you what happens in the first 5 or 10 pages to get you started with what's actually happening, and then I will then get you caught up, and then I'll leave you to it with that sort of a teaser, right, that you'll find out in the first couple of pages in the first couple of minutes of reading for you folks. But then, in this case, there are going to be light spoilers because this is a story that started in the Frost Monstrum with the quest to go defend the Rye Mile against these sea mongols. And so the first short story tells about the story of them getting there. And so if you recall at the beginning of that, in the first 4 or 5 pages long, they're in Lankhmar. They've now hit middle age, and they're talking about, settling down and finding a wife rather than just sleeping with the next conquest, and settling down and so forth, particularly Fafhrd, one of the 2 thieves that are heavily influential in this thing. And then also, then 2 women that are also middle age come in and they hire them to defend Rye Mile in our Frost Monstrum. Starting at that, we've now gone forward and so forth. So this I'm going to give you right now, unlike my other things, will have a light spoiler warning as to what's been happening in the last few short stories and where the story has gone since then. In this long title, short story by Fritz Leiber, the second to last of this collection. And then so it's going to have a light spoilers, but so I'm giving you right now a spoiler warning, and then I'll give you a few seconds to dial back out if you don't want to find out what's been happening at the other stuff for you folks. So I'm waiting. All right. So what's happening basically at the start of this this novella rather, is that he has. You're going to find out at the beginning that it's because Fritz Leiber and Fafhrd have moved. I'm not Fritz Leiber. Fafhrd and Gray Mouser have moved to Rye Mile and are now using it as a base of occupation rather than Lankhmar. They've been there for years and years, and a long time has passed. And now the 2 sorcerers that lived in the Lankhmar region that they served and did quests for on a pretty regular basis have now met with each other. They're arch rivals, so that's unusual. And then they're talking about their magic and their quests and so forth are failing because their 2 key servants are no longer serving them. So they decide to let the 3 gods know that we're under the thumbs of the gods that were punishing them for their failure of service. They let them know that they're on Rye Mile, and then one of them gives a curse to the Gray Mouser to only see small things, and he's focused constantly down. And then the Fafhrd will be cursed with always looking up and seeing the stars only, and he'll be obsessed with them. So they each become obsessed with different views and so forth. And so that's what's going to wind up happening. And that's about 10 pages in. So that's sort of the end of the spoilers for this thing. So what do I think about it? I liked it. I thought it was well written. It's a novella long. It took me about 2.5 hours over the course of 2 days for me to knock it down. I thought that it used its length well. I thought that it was well written. Fritz Leiber's in the Science Fiction Writers Hall of Fame, right? There's a reason why. This series has also won Hugo Awards. And he's one of the most awarded people out there, period. Right, so there's a reason why, he's still read today. So I liked it, but I didn't like the ending, right, and so forth. So I'm not going to talk about specifically what happens in the ending, because again, spoilers, but it deals with my issues of his writing of combat scenes. He just doesn't write combat scenes well or fast or to spend a whole lot of time with them, right? This is sort of my general thing. And so I'm not going to give you the spoilers as to what happens, right? But it deals with my ongoing issue with his inability to write a combat scene well. In the genre, it's called Sword and Sorcery, that he named, by the way, right? So anyway, so I don't like the ending, but I like what happens. I just don't like how it happens. So that holds me back from giving this a super high review. I'm only going to be giving this a 7 out of 10 for those reasons. But there you are. I'll go ahead and leave you to it. Have you read The Curse of the Smalls and the Stars by Fritz Leiber, the second to last short story in this series? If so, what do you think about it? Let's talk about it in the comments below. If you agree or disagree with my 7 out of 10, let's talk about that too. As a reminder, this channel is named The Worst Thing About New Books, a quote by a French philosopher, Jacques Joubert, who said that the worst thing about new books was that they kept us from reading the old ones. And this guy who got started publishing in 1939 in the pulp era, and died in 1992, but he even published in the 90s. He published in every decade from the 30s to the 90s, and is heavily influential in the genres that I cover. For this channel is a key reason why we're doing, a deep dive into him. So that's one of the reasons why we're covering him so much. This guy's so influential because this series in particular is heavily influential on modern fantasy. For example, he created the Thieves concept. So if you're playing on a role-playing game on tabletop or video, and you're playing the Thief class, you're playing the Fafhrd and Gray Mouser from this series. Also, if you're playing against the politics of a thieves guild in a city like Lankhmar, or if you have a giant seedy city like Lankhmar that dominates the plane, that has millions of people in it, has seedy places like Horror Street and the Plaza of Dark Delights, it's definitely taking its number from the world of Nelwyn that he created. Also in 1979, in an Appendix N in the Dungeon Master's Guide for the first edition, co-creator of Dungeons and Dragons, Gary Gygax said that this was one of the key influences and where he got a lot of his things from. Right, so you just can't read modern fantasy or encounter modern fantasy in video games without actually having his impact. So he's heavily influential. So there's another reason why we're doing a deep dive into him. Again, the title of my channel comes into play on that one too, for you folks. He actually was a co-writer. With H.P. Lovecraft as one of his folks in his writers cadre that wrote each other and so forth. And Lovecraft actually did some editing and some stuff for him. And unfortunately, Lovecraft died a couple of years before he published his first short story in 1939, which was actually in this Fafhrd series, Two Sought Adventure. So he's definitely, so I'm sure he would have been really happy to see how popular Fritz Leiber and big name he's going to wind up being, right? And he was actually a working author, even though he sold lots of things and won lots of awards. He just was still a working poor person, right? He was, another science fiction author went to go visit him, and he was like, okay, he saw that he was writing out of his kitchen rather than having a study to write out of or something like that in an apartment or a house big enough. He was just working out of his kitchen because that's the only space that he had, right? He was a working author, even though he sold lots of things and won lots of awards in this, in the Hall of Fame, right? So that's pretty, so he was a working writers person. Anyway, so that's Fritz Leiber really shortly, and while we're doing a deep dive into him. So if you like this review, why not hit that subscribe button? There's going to be a lot more of these to follow. And then finally, I want to thank you so much for taking some time out of your day and investing it and watching my video. We all have so many things that are happening in our lives, and we're pulled in so many different directions. So the fact that you spent this time with me is incredibly humbling, and I appreciate it. So thanks again, and have an amazing day.